Yeah. Let's read this little bit here. Mages pretty much have 2 mana states: pre-mana purchase, post-mana purchase. Yep, during their first trip to lane, they just have to be very careful on that. They cast spells. They run Yep. Once they back, they can spam almost mindlessly. True in most cases. Making a lot of changes to mana regen, and mana sustain. No longer gives base mana regen. No longer returns mana on any kill. So Jordan's Ring right now is, I think, 2 mana on kill. And it's 50% base mana regen. Well, no, it's 4. It's 4 mana for killing a unit, right? Yeah. So you get 4. So that means on your average wave, you get 24 mana back. So that means per 30 seconds, you should get 24 mana back. And you would get it by CSing. Instead, you will get 5 mana per 5 seconds, which would be 30 over 30. So that you're getting 6 mana more there. But you're going to have a little bit less because we lose the 50% base mana regen. So let's look at like a champion, like your average mage. And your average mage has something like 8 mana regen, or like, I think it's like 6 in the current patch. I think it's like changed to like 8. And so that means that you would get another 3 before, 3 per 5. And so if you got another 3 per 5 before, then you would have been looking at another 18. So previously, this could give you 24 plus 18, 42 mana per 30 seconds. Now this is going to give you about 30. So you're going to feel like you got about 33%, like let's just say like 25 to 40, anywhere in that range. It'll vary by champion and how much CS you got. Like 25 to 40% less mana on your first outing. It'll be a little easier to CS, I guess, which is okay. I mean, whatever. But this is a decent nerf to its mana early and might open up some other options, but other items are generally really bad anyway, comparatively. So since this is still going to give health, a good amount of AP, and a pretty healthy amount of mana regen, like this is probably still going to be the default that most people go to, independent of the fact that it's weaker. Lost Chapter gains 15 ability power and goes up 200 cost of gold. I think those are about equal changes. That means I think this is slightly more cost efficient now, but you can get it a little bit less early, so it'll be a little bit less potent as a spike. Okay. Tier 100 more mana, 5% less refund on every spell you cast. Alright, this is a good change because tier basically when you buy it basically makes your mana non-existent. Like you don't have to worry about your blue bar ever. When you gain max mana, it preserves your current percent mana. Applies to Mana Moon and Archangel Staff too. So what this means is like if you're at half mana and you use tier, normally you get 4 mana back, right? So let's say you cast a 50 mana spell and you're at half mana, then right now you get 4 mana. Just like if you cast a 50 mana spell and you have 50 mana left, then you get 4 mana back. So you instantly get basically 4 mana. Whereas now, if that 50 put you at like 0, then you would basically go to 0 mana. So you'd get 0 or 1 mana back from the tier, from the percentage that you get. So tier will be much worse for the mana it gives you as you get lower on mana. It will make it a little bit harder to spam, especially with this, and the cost is going up. These are pretty decent nerfs to like rushing a tier. The alternative was obviously rushing like a Lost Chapter, which got a little bit more expensive too. This is still an easy price point for most champions that want to get a recall in pre-6. So unless there's something else that's competitive, people could still be buying this early. Or we could see people building toward Lost Chapter now that it has like the more AP. And since this is weaker, you'll have a lot more individual power, especially with the 40 AP now instead of the 25. Okay, let's look at GLP. The old GLP is still on the weak side. Also feels less responsive. Feel good buffs. Combined cost is 200 less. That's because of the Lost Chapter. Yep, it gains 100 mana. The slow lasts longer. That's what they nerfed initially. The missiles do not take as long to spread. Missile speed is there, so I don't even know why they put this here. This is worthless. They just put the whole list of shit here, I guess. But this just makes the active a ton better and a ton more reliable. It'll be a lot easier to hit. You get a little bit more mana out of it. Ultimately, unless I see like a change with Ludens, people are still going to build Ludens in a lot of the situations where they want GLP, because most champions don't need the accessibility of the GLP slow to make their champion function. So a lot of and most of those champions are like the champions that would want it, like thinking like Aurelion Sol or something, because he used to like GOP a lot, but that's when it had health on it because he's relatively short range. Then this could help him, but he still wants health, so in most cases he's probably not going to build this regardless, unfortunately. So I feel like most people would still go Ludens alternatively. Alright, Fiendish Codex, up 5 ability power. Zhonya's and Banshees also have 5 more ability power. That's fine, because Zhonya's is a little weak on the stat value, Banshees is a little weak on stat value, and 5 ability power on the base item, so this is a little bit more competitive. I don't think anybody's ever going to buy this item over like a Lost Chapter, considering they're at similar price points, 1100, 1300. Like when they were 1100, you would never buy this basically ever. But at least now there's a little bit more incentive to. I mean, Lost Chapter has more AP than this does. Lost Chapter also gives you the CDR, so and it gives you the tons of mana. So basically, this item doesn't really do anything as like a standalone, because everybody would rather build this. So like this is just like a small buff while you're building into other shit, which will probably be like your second, third item, fourth item, that kind of thing. So you'll feel a little bit stronger. I don't think this is a meaningful change, because this doesn't affect early, and later in the game 5 ability power isn't that consequential. Twin Shadows. The active on this can act as like pseudo engage or like soft engage to help compositions that don't necessarily have engage. So this can be like a good buy. I wouldn't like to see it buffed to the point where it became like a must buy for like the utility that it has in conjunction with having like a good stat point, but I think this is like relatively safe still. I think it wasn't like crazy over budget in the first place, so you can put a little bit more power on it. And Riot likes to do something where they incentivize people to buy items that aren't bought often, independent of the item's power. Even if the item is very powerful on its own, a lot of times it'll get buffed if it's not seeing a lot of use, so that it will see use, and then it will be found out that it's powerful, and then it will be adjusted from there. So that's something that happens. Seekers. This is a fine change because Seekers honestly feels kind of expensive, and if it's in like the same price point range as something like Lost Chapter, then you're probably just going to buy Lost Chapter even if you wanted armor, because Lost Chapter gives you basically the mana to fight back, and it gives you mana to clear safely, and if you can clear safely enough, then you don't really need the armor to fight back against like attack damage champions. I don't think this ultimately changes much. I think you'd still go Lost Chapter most of the times that you were going to go like an item around this price point, or you'd go like Tier or something, but so I don't think this changes very much, but it might feel good into some things, like if they have like 80 jungler plus 80 mid laner, and you want to counter out the lethality a little bit, because lethality is super efficient if you don't build in the armor, then maybe like an early Seekers, or you could buy like the cloth armors for it or something and feel a little bit better about turning it in. It should be super efficient when you stack it up because of the less gold cost. So the lower this goes, the gold value when it's stacked is already like ludicrously high for what you pay. So the lower this gets, the more effective that's going to be. So that's fine. That means Zhonya should be 100 gold more too, right? Yeah, it should be. Not 100 gold more, but just from that. The Degenerate is back. True. This could be a short stream. I might just do the patch notes and then upload these and call it for the day. I got my Winter Ascending guide up though, for on the PoE forums. So let's look at Spellbinder. Up 100 gold. Yep. Up 20 ability power, and you lose that same 20 on the activation, then you get more movement speed on the activation. So this is better for the champions that want to roam on it. It's a little bit more individually powerful, so you're less gated by having the active. These are just healthy changes for the item in general, because too much of the power is in the active. This is a really dangerous item because they put too much power into it. Then it really incentivizes champions to roam and to snowball harder. So this item already has a really high win rate when champions build it, but people are building it in scenarios where they're already winning a lot of the times, so I don't think that's necessarily reflective of the item's power. But this item can really easily become a snowball item because of like how much movement speed this is going to give, and like the flat AP that it's going to give to like burst champions. So this item could easily, with like small changes, become like a problematic item that like a lot of mid laners have to build to be able to fight each other. Because if their mid laner pops this and has 200 AP and you don't have 200 AP and they have all-in threat on you, then you could actually just die, right? I mean, for like one item, 200 AP is ridiculous, right? So, and then they have the 50% movement speed to pick that fight that you might not have as much of a say about. So this is a dangerous item, but I think these changes are fine. If it went much further, I think the item could like just be like overall kind of busted, to be honest. But they have to be careful with this. Rylai's 5 more AP. I've already seen more people building Rylai's, and it got better on the champions that were building it. I kind of like it now as like a mid game item on like Talia. I know Aurelion Sol likes it. Cassiopeia's always liked Rylai's. Those kinds of champions are going to buy it regardless of the AP normally. So it being better for them is great because that's just they're just getting a small buff, right? But the more they do for Rylai's, the better, because as it wasn't cost efficient in any capacity, and I think the build path for it kind of sucks. But now, like, it'll feel a little bit better to build, and because at least you get a little bit more out of it on the back end. All right, go down here. Magi's upgrading Dark Seals, so stacks the moves. Oh, so you can stack up your Dark Seal and then switch it over, and you're immediately going to get the buff, the pretty noticeable movement speed that you get from Magi's, just instantly. So you can buy Dark Seal early, and then as like a non-committal item, because Dark Seal is already pretty good early, and then just turn it into a Magi's a little later. So Dark Seal could become much better now, because if you get a couple of kills, you can get this up. And then if this is up and you switch it into movement speed, this is going to be a lot more accessible to turn it into Magi. So if you're already winning, you turn it into Magi's. If not, well, it doesn't matter. Dark Seal is not that bad anyway. So Dark Seal could be a pretty competitive starting item, especially if people like to go Refillable Pot, or if they want to go Corrupting Pot or something like that down the line. If they take TP, they want to get an early back end so they can get the combo, the Corrupting Pot plus Dark Seal combo. Then this change helps Dark Seal a little bit as a starting item. So this could be good, especially with the Doran's Ring nerfs up there. That could be good. Just went to the Scion forum. It's for degenerates confirmed. Hell yeah, dude. Luden's already on the weak side. I don't know if I agree. I think Archangels is just busted. But 100 more mana on Luden's, 100 more cost off of Luden's. These are great changes. A lot of champions that want some mana and they want the CDR are going to go Luden's now, especially with these changes to tier, where they already nerfed the AP that you get from Archangel, so it's less glaringly powerful compared to the to its alternatives. Thanks for the 2 months in a row, Kyle. I appreciate it. Much love. So the tier changes coupled with the Luden's changes and the changes that they did to Archangel's last patch could mean that we actually start to see more people opt into the alternatives of like Luden's and GLP. Though I think GLP still isn't the greatest. Not sure how long I'm gonna stream. I might play something after. I'm not 100% sure. So maybe Battle Royale. I don't know if I want to stream it or not. No, not 100%. Turrets. Taking turrets is an important mechanic in the game. Mages get left out. Alright, you get 10% more of your damage converted. If a basic attack uses ability power bonus to turrets, the whole attack will convert to magic damage, rather than only ability power scaling portion. I think turrets have even armor and magic, so maybe this just means that you can scale your pen on turrets. Do turrets have even armor and magic? Can I look at? Let me look at a turret. I think they do. 55 armor, 55 magic resist. Yeah. So this just means that your pen will be slightly more effective on turrets. I don't think this is a meaningful change in any capacity. The 10% is cool. You'll get slightly more damage as a mage now. This isn't important. Alright, let's look at this. So all these mages are gaining a lot of mana regen. Zyra's gaining a ton. Wow. This varies too. Like this is different per champion. She's getting 5, but like you're getting 2 on like here. That's actually crazy. Those changes are big. So the big thing here is that you're going to have more mana early, naturally, and so you're going to be a little bit less dependent on buying mana items early because your champion will be able to function a little bit better baseline. You are going to need some flat mana probably because your overall mana pool is not going to be as strong. What these changes also do is they further nerf Archangels. So Archangels was nerfed last patch to lower the AP that you get when you convert it. Archangels was nerfed this patch with the mana refund that you get and with the amount of current mana that you get from using it. And then if you have less mana across the game, like let's say you get 70 mana here, you get 80 mana. Yeah, so let's just say you get like 70 to 100 mana. So and then every one of these champions is basically in like 4 levels going to lose more mana than that anyway. So as soon as this champion hits level 5, she has less mana for the rest of the game, less flat mana, which means that you're going to have as much as a couple hundred less for like your Archangel. So that's a good chunk less ability power. That's less for your Archangel shield. That's less that you're going to be able to spam. So you'll have more mana immediately. So on your first outing, basically, you're going to have a little bit more accessibility. The only thing that's going to change there is Doran's Ring got nerfed a little bit for the mana it gives you back. That got moved into here basically for these champions. And then the mana items. Wait. These champions will also... Oh, these are the ones that don't build the mana items. Okay. So these champions don't get, like, the mana to help. Okay. But this will make, like, Ludens a much more attractive option, and having flat mana and looking for... So this will slightly lower the value of Wave Clear. Because Wave Clear, if you have less mana, is a little bit harder to do. So champions that can do Wave Clear for cheap are going to be more valuable, and Wave Clear long term won't be as accessible, especially if everybody's not going Archangels. So if we start going things like Ludens, that could speed up the pacing of the game around mid lane because there's going to be more damage available. People will be less safe because they don't have the shield from Seraphs at like 18 minutes, and people will be incentivized to fight each other because they have the Ludens proc and they have a little bit more damage out of it, and they don't have as much mana, so they want to make a play while they have mana. What's up, Terrible Noob? So these changes should mix up items a little bit. I would assume most people might default off of Archangels between the scaling mana changes here, plus the tier changes and the Archangels changes last patch. Then we might finally see people start to move away from Archangels Master Race. Every champion takes Archangels in every situation, like that kind of thing. Let's go down. Champions. Amumu, 30 mana. Oh, 50 later. This is a big reduction. So Amumu already has a weak early game. He's extra penalized for failed ganks. This also means that he might be able to use his Q more when he's just doing camps for single target damage to make his clear a tiny bit faster on single target camps in particular. Because as it stands, 80 is ridiculous for a level 1 skill for like a jungler, and it was like never worth casting. 50 you could probably get away with it if you have like blue buff or something. So I could see, like, yeah, this will definitely achieve their goal if they want Amumu players not to be punished as hard for, like, failing a gank early. And I don't think, I mean, not that Amumu ganks are crazy early anyway. I mean, he stuns you for half a second and then you walk away, normally. But it's in the right direction. I don't think they changed much about Amumu, but, I mean, it's a pretty harmless thing to buff, so can't be hurt, right? Can't hurt. Alright. I want to hurt her neutral monster damage. So this currently does 250% damage. Instead, it's going to be plus 100. So instead of 2.5, it's going to be 2 times. So this is losing 20% of its damage. Yeah, this is losing 20% of its damage against minions, and that just means that she'll lifesteal a little bit less when she hits monsters. She'll lifesteal a little bit less when she hits things that aren't champions. So she's going to be incentivized to look for headshots on champions because the difference is going to be a little bit less now. I mean, ultimately, you're still going to get more lifesteal when you hit like a minion or a monster than a champion, but this makes the difference a little bit less glaring, and it makes it so like later in the game or like mid game, she can't just like headshot one minion and go to full because of like she has a lifesteal item or something, because it just multiplies the damage by almost 3 times. It does multiply it by 3 times if you have enough crit. Mundo. This is a big healing increase. So Mundo has this thing where, like, if he is viable to be played into, like, squishy to middling tanky champions, like bruisers, not hard tanks, then he can kind of just run them over with his extra health because he just has more health pool than they can deal with, and he runs them over with his percentage health damage and his constant damage. He has good steroids. So if Mundo is good, it's normally because of like the things that in the meta aren't very good. They can't deal with Mundo well. Mundo is still going to be very easy to dive early, so he's very easy to punish, especially with some of the tanky junglers that are currently played. And like, it's generally you play a tanky jungler or you play an aggressive early jungler, and both of those can threaten Mundo really early. Mundo needs some babysitting early, but Mundo, these are actually pretty meaningful buffs. I mean, basically you always interact with a healing reduction later in the game. So this is basically going from being 30% to 50%. I mean, that's still a massive increase. It's still a massive increase. So we should see more Mundo. I would expect that we would see him experimented with more in general. This is mostly a later game change. I mean, it's only 10% at rank 1, which isn't like crazy, but Mundo is more a stylistic counter to certain picks, so this will make him more appealing in those situations. Like, he's really good into magic damage because he can sustain through it, and then he just runs you over anyway, right? So Mundo is often picked into like double magic damage, and he can be played as like a decent jungler sometimes when the jungle meta is not too invade heavy, because then he can be bullied. I mean, Mundo, if he is plenty healthy, he can just kick your ass, right? He just does tons of fucking damage, but if he gets caught somewhere on his like first clear, then he can get bullied for sure. Yo, thanks, dude. It has like a wolf on it. Okay. So Garen, compared to similar jungle, can you become a Korean K-pop star or a lot of Aimeka? Me and Avril do a concert together. Yo, I could be about it. I could be all about that. Compared to similar juggernauts, so he's gaining damage on his Q. He doesn't max Q anyway, does he? Doesn't Garen max E for the damage early? I think so. I don't know if this is meaningful, right? Because this is gonna come late in the game. Let me double check that. Let me double check that. How are you guys doing today, by the way? Okay, so like an even number of people max Q is E. No, wait, yeah. Actually, an even number of people max Q is E. That's interesting. So maybe people can max Q in lane into certain matchups that they know they're gonna be able to get like the quick auto Q off, and then they spin on you while you're silenced. So, this is some kind of buff. I guess if it's already a melee matchup, then maybe you can bully them a little bit harder. He probably bullies things like Aurelia, Jax, like the melee champions that have to interact with him are going to be the ones that he can abuse the most with this change. And then he wants a quick trade. Like, he doesn't want to let them stack up their constant damage, because after his cooldowns are down, he's not going to be that impactful anyway. So maybe this just means that in the matchups that he can get away with it, he'll just max Q, since it looks like there's actually an even amount of both anyway. So now refreshes when attacking large monsters. So her passive will refresh on large monsters. That's interesting. He just pisses off with his passive. True. So basically what this means is that she'll stack up her damage and healing on jungle monsters, which they didn't let her do before because they deliberately didn't want her to be a jungler, because like her stun is does less damage to monsters, her Q does more damage to minions but not to monsters, and then her stun is like really reliable and her ultimate is really reliable. So I feel like she could actually have like a toxic play pattern from the jungle. So if they encourage this too much, then it could be problematic. I feel like you would just max E and just clear camps, like, because the AoE on it would be really impactful and the stun would scale up. So, but this I feel like is fine. I feel like they still have like two other things in place in her kit that hurt her jungling enough that she's probably not going to be like a great jungler anyway. But she has a good kit for jungling if she gets tuned slightly more for it. Ivern, passive health cost decrease, passive maturation time decrease at later ranks. So, cost less at every rank, cool. So you'll be a little bit healthier early, less risk of getting murdered. And the range is the same early. I think this used to scale down a little bit more aggressively towards 6, so maybe this is a slight nerf mid-game. But it's 1 second at 15 plus. Alright, so later in the game, Ivern actually does have this problem where before, you wouldn't want to stand next to something for like 10 seconds because you'd sit there, you'd mark it, which takes a second, and then you sit there for 6 seconds, then you mark, and then you grab it, which takes a second, and then like by the time you got back away from it, like you'd spent like 10 seconds, right? Like going to the, like taking the time to get to the camp and then get it. Whereas now you can mark it, sit there for 1 second, like you can be done in 2-3 seconds tops. So this can increase like his ability to stay in the game, because later in the game he kind of just stops farming altogether and he just kind of follows the team around as a support player. So this will enable him to still get some income as the game progresses, considering he doesn't get like a gold generation item like a support does. So this is probably just like a healthy change for his later game in general. I think not scaling up to like level 12, he might be a little bit worse mid game. I'm not sure what the range is right now, but I think this might be a little bit worse mid game. But late game, this will be a big boon for him. Missile width, this is actually a pretty substantial increase too. 65 to 80 is actually a pretty decent amount. So That's almost 25. Is that like that is like 25% bigger. I was gonna say almost like 30, but so this is actually pretty substantial. This will make it a lot easier to land. It's not that hard to land as is, to be honest. It's not that thin, but and his ganks can be pretty good, but the lane has to have enough damage to support what he brings, because he doesn't bring really damage. This is substantial, dude. How about that? So I think he still can like fit in like certain compositions. I don't think he was like unplayable before. These are some nice some kind of feel good changes, but I think they'll make him a good amount stronger, substantially stronger. How about that, bud? Dialing back Kai'Sa's late game scaling, which doesn't carry quite as hard. So this has a fucking obscene, broken, stupid, retarded ratio on it that's absolutely unfair and should have never been in the game in the way it was, because the damage it does is completely unfair. And it wasn't considered an AoE, so you'd press Death Dance and you would heal for like 75% of your health for some godforsaken reason. Good job, Riot. But now it's an AoE, so you'll get healing for a third of that. So if it did 75% of your health before because it had some stupid ratio, well, now it'll do 16% less damage, and then it will heal you for 33% less. So ultimately, you're going to get healed for, 33% of what it was, not 33% less. So ultimately, you're going to get healed for like a quarter of what you used to get healed for. Sick. Good change. Now she's not an abuse case for Death's Dance. And this was stupid because it meant that she could E, auto you twice if you're in a group, and then E again. So she could spend so much time invisible that she was basically impossible to deal with. So these are healthy changes that remove the fact that she has abuse cases in her kit for certain items and interactions. She has literally interactions in her kit that should have never been a thing because Riot has tried their hardest not to allow these kinds of interactions in the game recently, and then she comes out and she was just chock full of them for some godforsaken reason. She has all these special interactions and it's cool and exciting because she scales with like 10 different stats, right? No, it's not. It's not cool if she just presses Q with Death Dance and heals to full. It's not cool if she spends 80% of the game invisible. Sorry, Riot. Sorry. Alright, so Kassadin. 20 on his shield at rank 1. This is quite a bit. This will actually make him a lot safer, and in the lanes that he's already good into, he'll probably still be good into. He can survive things like Taliyah. He can survive any like mid-damage champion. Like he can survive Corki. He can survive anything that's not AD, basically, and anything that doesn't have like kill threat on him, like immediately like in the game, to punish his short range. So this will make his easy matchups easier. I don't think this fixes his bad matchups really. It might make some of his bad matchups a little less bad if they do some meaningful magic damage, but you'd probably pick Kassadin in mostly the same situations, and he will feel about the same, but he will be even harder to punish in lane. So for the matchups he's already good in, he's even better, and that's probably the only times you're going to pick him regardless. Kennen. I'll get to this in a second. Let's just look at it here. Kennen gains attack speed after exiting Lightning Rush. Does this scale with level or with like rank or level? I don't know. And he loses the defensive bonuses. That's interesting. So this encourages a playstyle where he's not going to be in melee of you. He doesn't want to be in the middle of your whole team because he's going to lose like the 50 armor and MR that he gets now, which is actually massive. It's a huge buff, and like it makes him so much disproportionately tankier than he should feel for like the items that he has. So instead he's going to get a steroid to chase you down. So this heavily incentivizes attack to speed, attack damage, like on hit, like split push Kennen, like top lane Kennen that was like building Bork and shit. Probably build Guinsoo's now with the current state of Guinsoo's. 5th attack base damage up at all ranks but 1. 5th attack ratio is better, so he'll scale better. The AP ratio is slightly down. The AP ratio on the active is way up, and the base damage is slightly down. So AD Kennen maxes this. AP Kennen uses this for extra damage after like an ult or after like landing like a Q. This is a big damage boost for AP Kennen for its poke fantasy, and this is overall a buff for AD Kennen. So these just AD Kennen looks like it gets a lot better with this, a lot better, and AP Kennen gets slightly better, if not even potentially slightly worse if it's going to be sitting in the middle of a fight. Because AD Kennen later in the game can just act as like a pseudo AD carry, but AP Kennen kind of needs to have that high impact. And if it's like less defensive when Kennen's on his way in, then Kennen might have a harder time finding that high impact. So this might hurt AP, but it's probably buffs overall for the champion, especially for AD Kennen. Leona. 20 base damage on her W. Leona already does tons of damage. This will make her like level 2, 3 all in, like that much stronger. So, hell yeah. Leona can be super oppressive. And Leona's bad into the meta of what's picked in solo queue. That is like Lulu and Janna and shit like that. So, if Leona is good in spite of the meta being against her, then Leona is probably overtuned. So, if the goal is to make Leona good in the current meta, then they're going to have to break her. Because she should be bad in the current meta. Because the things that are good into Leona are good. Now, if we had things like Soraka or like mage supports, then Leona should be good. Purely because that's her stylistic counter. But if she gets buffed to counteract the current meta, rather than the current meta being nerfed to get into the same tier as everything else, for like, at least for solo queue. The competitive meta and the solo queue meta for support are completely different. Then these can be unhealthy changes. I don't know if Leona needs more damage, honestly, because she already can kill like the lanes that she has threat into, and she is going to struggle into the more defensive peel supports anyway, so not sure if this is meaningful, right? I mean, it's a buff. It's inevitably like a decent buff early, but she shouldn't be good in the current state, so... Let's look at Lux here. She gains attack speed, loses attack speed growth. So she gains attack speed at all points in the game, because this isn't big enough. That's not a big enough number. So she gains attack speed at all points in the game, a lot early. Loses some health. Over the course of the game, she can lose up to 100 health. That's interesting. Make her a little bit more vulnerable, I guess. Now let's look at this stuff. 20 to base damage on her Q at rank 1 is substantial. Lower mana cost and 10-second cooldown on this. This is a very large buff, actually. This is a huge buff for Lux. Wow. They just buffed literally everything about it. I don't even think Lux is that bad. So she'll be able to fish for binds a lot more reliably. This means that normally she wouldn't get her access to most of her bind cooldown to fish as often as she wants to until level 13, because that's when she'd have her 11-second cooldown. Instead, she's going to have access to that from level 2, basically, unless she takes W to trade in lane. So level 2, 3, she's going to have the full access to her pick potential, and that will be more available at all points, because even at max rank it's lower, and she's going to be punished less for fishing. So when something's like a mana cost like 40 and it scales to like 60, like this is a really low mana cost to spend to like fish for like something that can potentially like one shot like a squishy. So there's not much incentive for her not to fish when like it costs like this little. The bigger thing that gates her mana is her E, which I see like a mana cost change in here, so that'll be interesting. Return shield, 200% always. Oh, so this is just a buff to her shield that she doesn't. So even if she's just laning, she can just shield herself twice, and then she's going to get a massive shield, because the shield is honestly, it's a crazy big shield as long as she hits an ally right now. But instead, it's just going to always do that, and then she shields herself instantly instead of after the cast time. She still gets rooted for the cast time, but the shield is instant. Huh. Also interesting. Just like a usability change, I guess. And then, what was the goal here? They wanted to make her E easier to avoid. Alright, so the problem with her E, I don't think these changes actually make her E very much easier to avoid. So, the problem with her E is it has a big enough radius, and I think 310 is still going to be big enough, that she throws it at the middle of you, and she presses the button, and it goes off instantly when it gets there, right? So she throws it in the middle of you, and no matter how fast you walk, you can't get out of it in time. She just throws it at you, and it pops before you can get out of it, unless she just horribly misses. So... this is, I don't think these actually hurt her ability to E-poke very much, especially, and it doesn't hurt her ability to all-in at all, so she'll be able to get passive procs off more easily with this too, so it'll reward her for fishing. Missile speed down, it's doomed! Yeah, this doesn't hurt her at all. But the mana cost does go down as it ranks up, and the cooldown goes down too. So this is going to give her more access to poke, because she inevitably maxes this for the wave clear too. Alright, I don't think these changes do what Riot wanted at all. These do not make her Lucent Singularity less consistent. These are it's still going to land all the time. It's going to cost less mana, and she's going to get to do it more often. Lux is going to be a ton better. I would not be surprised. Well, the problem with Lux is she doesn't have as reliable of wave clear as other mids, right? Because Lux has like a long cooldown on her E, and it costed a ton of mana. So if things in her kit cost less mana and her E cooldown is down, so then she will have a little bit better wave clear. I don't think she can compete with the wave clear of shit like Galio, shit like Taliyah, like things like that, like Syndra inevitably. Like those kinds of champions just have crazy wave clear. But these are changes that help Lux's wave clear, and she's not giving up basically anything for these changes. She's going to be more efficient on mana. I think the item changes can help her because Ludens can give her the ability to kill somebody a little bit earlier in the game, and she gets more CDR than she used to for cheaper because you can get Lost Chapter real early. This is just a big buff in general because her E being up more, being more available means that you can get this down to a 4.8 second cooldown. Yeah, 4.8 second cooldown on her E, which is, I mean, then you can E a creep wave twice on its way in with 4.8 second cooldown realistically, and probably kill creep waves a lot more reliably, and it would cost in that scenario 40 less mana to get the 2 off, and 40 less mana every time you like throw 2 E's at a creep wave is actually pretty significant. And then she just has more damage early too. Lux will probably become very, very good in solo queue from these changes, and support Lux will be just strictly better too. I don't think these changes really nerf Lux in any capacity. I don't think this makes it meaningfully harder to dodge, to hit Lucian's Singularity. I think you could still probably just throw it in the middle of their body and they're probably going to get hit by it. I mean, it had a big leeway before, so. I think Lux can be kind of toxic design when her E is very available. When you don't have a champion that can punish her, she can do this for free over and over, and it's really hard to threaten her because of like the range that she can do it from and the low cost of it. So it's becoming less of a cost. So this is, I would expect Lux to raise in priority very highly. I don't know if she'd be picking competitive play because she can still be punished, she can still be closed on, and she really is only valuable in team fights for like picks. This increases her sustained damage a little bit, but she's only really super valuable for like pick damage. This is super good too in lane. Her laning phase is going to be a ton better. Lux is going to have a very strong laning phase now. Very, very strong in mid and support. So that's very interesting. Rammus still has a good solo queue win rate, so I don't know like why they need to necessarily buff him, but 10 armor. He basically has this up like half the time that he's in the jungle, if not more. A lot of the time that he's taking damage, he has this up. And this scales up his damage a little bit too, so this is actually a pretty solid buff for Rammus. 10 armor in the jungle is actually a meaningful amount of damage reduction too. This is a lot. And this is a lot in one patch. She's going to go up a lot. Alright, let's look at this. She loses 5 movement speed. She gained 50 range on her passive. Okay, so that puts her up to probably like 500-ish. So like, this means that she can like throw this at like the same range that like Gnar and like other champions can like auto to like range champions. So that's good. This is a fine change. Movement speed less. Base resistance is less. Why are these all nerfed? Wait, what? Heroic charge, 50 more range. Snapcast, no. Why was it 210, 310, 410? What? These are stupid damage numbers. Why were these ever in the game? Slightly less. This is a big buff. This is huge. Because this means that if she has the, if she's in range, she can flash E, ult you. Let's just flash E, snap ult, right? And you're pushed back, and then you get knocked up instantly. And there's basically no counterplay to it if you're within her flash range. So it'll be like, if you're within 1,000 range of her, she can get to you and snap you into the air. And what that means is you're going to be knocked up for 0.75 seconds instead of 1, but it's enough time for people to collapse on you normally. And previously, this meant that you were untargetable and they had to prep shit for when you came down. Now they can just beat the living shit out of you while you're in the air. So this is actually a really big buff to her engage potential, and makes her a lot more potent, especially in like a gank scenario too, because now she can follow up on somebody else and you guys can do full damage the entire time, and you don't have to be precise with like your timing or anything like that. So this, and it also makes it a little bit easier to protect the champions that are knocked up, because you can ult like while the person's like knocked up or something like that, or if you're like Lulu, or you can shield them or whatever it might be. But I think this is a pretty big buff to Lulu. I mean, not to Lulu, to Poppy. This is a pretty big buff to Poppy, because this enables her team to collapse on like plays that she can make a lot easier, and it sets up her gank potential a lot easier. Missile speed on this is also really good, because it makes it that much more reliable. And if you ever ult somebody out of a fight as Poppy, you're basically won the fight already. It doesn't even matter who it is. You can hit the support, you can hit the tank, you can hit any carry, you can hit the jungler, who's probably worthless at 40 minutes unless it's like Sejuani or something. And no matter who it is, you're gonna the 5v4 that ensues is basically free. So, big buffs to her ultimate. She loses a little bit of power for it, but these are perfectly fair, I think, because that's a big ultimate buff. I would expect to see more Poppy, just because of this. And Poppy's good into some of the things that we'll probably start seeing more of. She's losing ability power on her W, and she's gaining ability power on her E and R, so she loses sustained ability power ratio, but gains burst AP ratios. Does she have other good ratios? Like, her Q doesn't have a ratio, her W is not going to have a ratio anymore. Alright, this is meaningless. 3 damage for Sona's base auto attack damage. Base auto attack damage is really valuable, especially on range supports, so that's actually consequential. Some would say substantial. And 5 damage on power chord. So this means that, like, in an early power chord, she doesn't just get the 5 damage, she would actually get 8, because power chord is always an auto attack too. And she's going to get a lot more time to punish on, like, short range champions. So into melee matchups, this makes a big difference. Into range matchups, it makes slightly less of a difference. I mean, she's going to be able to poke people more meaningfully now. 3 attack damage is the bigger buff here than this. But either way, positive changes. Sona could probably use it. She fell down a little bit in popularity, and I know Riot likes to have her at a really high win rate because she's really simple. So you got to make sure that the poster child for support is doing all right. All right, so Dark Sphere lasts 2 additional seconds. Instead, Dark Sphere does 15% additional damage to champions. Okay. So I kind of like the fact that it lasted 2 more seconds, because I guess the reason they're putting here is because it didn't really reward her for setting up for a big ultimate. But most of the time, Syndra, like, QEs, and even if you just get hit by the E, you get ulted by, like, a 5-ball ultimate, not a 7-ball ultimate, and you just die. So I don't think this meaningfully changes her play pattern, because ultimately she just kills you without needing the full damage anyway, 9 times out of 10. She normally overkills you by a good amount if she gets all of her damage off. So I don't think, like, taking away the seconds is, like, a meaningful nerf to her ultimate. But Darksteel doing 15% additional damage to champions is meaningful, because that's a 15% AP ratio buff, that's a 15% flat damage buff. 15% AP ratio is meaningful too. This means she'll do quite a bit more to tanks. She already has good sustained damage into tanks too. But this, I would assume that this is strictly a buff. Even though, like, her Qs can be down for a really long time, and then you can spread them out with E or something, and that can be, like, it can be really hard to dodge because you just send out such a spread that you get, like, so many stuns, and, like, it will go in, like, so many different directions. I still think this is pretty free. This is a pretty free buff. Alright. Fixed a bug where Talon's Q range was lower than expected. 75 range is a good amount lower than it should have been, like 500 to 575. So this is quite a bit, because his Q 500 is lower than most mages' auto attack range, because most mages have like 550. 575 is now equal or a little bit more than most mages' auto attack range. So if they auto attack you, then you have the threat to all in them now. So this doesn't seem like a big change, and I don't know why 75 range is substantial. I don't know why that's a bug. Like, fix that, right? But this is actually, like, it gives him a lot more accessibility to longer range champions to try to get his quick trades off, where he gets, like, both hits of his W, Q, and auto to get the passive. Warwick's early dueling and clear speed. It was center to center instead of edge to edge. Those rookies. Warwick's early dueling and clear speed allows few opportunities to fight him. True, if you ever fight Warwick, you basically auto-lose because of his W passive, and his E gives damage reduction, and he has CC and percentage health damage. That's also an auto-reset, and CC immunity, and 800 fucking different things in this kit. Got a lot going for him. 3 attack damage, small nerf. This probably isn't terribly meaningful. This might mean people don't max Q, because a lot of people already maxed the run speed, move speed one, so maybe they'll just max that guaranteed now. Don't think these meaningfully hurt Warwick that much. It's a small nerf. It'll hurt his fighting a little bit. It'll slow his clear a little bit, but ultimately he's going to be just as reliable. He's always going to be full health, and if you ever drop him low health, he's going to outstat check you anyway, so don't think these change what he does, but they are slight nerfs, so okay. I'm fine with that. If they keep, like, his identity that, like, if he gets low, he's supposed to just scritch the fuck out of you and just auto-win, like, okay, like, that can be a feature. But then they can still nerf shit and keep that fantasy. So, like, this is good to that end. Explosive Minefield, the damage scales up better. You max the second, so you'll feel this a little bit on minions, because that's 10 damage per And this can do a lot of damage if you end up having to go through multiple mines, or if you get knocked through like multiple mines or something. Like, you know, that you do the Talia combo on Ziggs or something. What's the max damage on this? I want to see like how much of an increase this is for like max damage potential. Like, let's say you throw it out in the middle of a team fight and they have to go through all of it or something. Total single target damage can do up to 900. Holy shit. Well, that's after the changes. So that's 180. What was it before? It was 140. So it does 5 times. So it can do 200 more damage in like a team fight. AoE. That's pretty substantial later in the game. This is cool. I don't like Ziggs. Ziggs is toxic as shit. Actually, just never buff Ziggs. Just fucking remove this. He's so uninteractive. He clears from like off the fucking screen. The fucking bomb bounces 3 times. He literally clears from like 2 screens away. And then his ultimate clears sideways to slow the game down. And then his E slows you from like encroaching on him. And his W gives him safety. And let's remove this champion. Fixed a bug where it gave more attack damage than intended. God damn it, Rageblade. Interesting. I don't think this changes who will really build it. Maybe Jin. I think Master Yi and shit would still build it, so. Some team compositions find Baron way too threatening. We're upping his health, so it takes longer. A bigger team fight advantage if you do contest. Alright, so what's the idea here? Baron is going to do less damage. Baron has a lot more base health. That's a lot. That's a lot. And Baron does... This was a passive that he did to try to spread damage around. So instead of corruption randomly on lower targets, he's now going to just hit people? Wait, but they said they wanted to spread the damage around more. But this doesn't go to the target with lowest corruption stacks anymore, so isn't this just going to put more damage into the main targets anyway? Unless you're standing and shit, like the spikes. I don't get how this spreads the damage more. And spreading its damage around the whole team. How does this spread the damage? Am I missing something? Like, the spike is avoidable, and it's gonna do this through basic attacks, but it's not gonna do the passive. Unless it's also doing a passive, but it says right here like they're only going to gain corruption from being hit instead of like the passive from before. So doesn't this just mean like the tank will take more damage than your front line will, but your back line won't? Anyway, the health buff is good because everybody does Baron on spawn. This is fine. I don't think this does what they're saying it does, but it will increase his damage. They gave him a Runons. Sick. He deserved it. Rift Herald! It does less damage to itself. It does a lot more damage to turrets. And if you can get multiple hits off, this will be really important. Because it'll do 1,500 instead of the 40%. Oh, this is sick. Oh, this is a big buff to Rift Herald. And then you have to babysit his eye more. Alright, so this gives you a little bit more counterplay to fight against the Rift Herald, and it makes the Rift Herald higher reward, potentially. And in basically every scenario, when he gets 1 hit off, he's going to be a higher reward. But if he can, if you can get him, if you can escort him to get 2, my man is going to put in work on them turrets. So this is cool. Oh, is this the change they were doing to Unsealed Spellbook? Alright, let's look at it. Unsealed Spellbook is intended to offer a keystone players who want to be able to reactively opt into a different summoner spell. Problem is, it gives too much advanced planning. New one can be swapped anywhere as long as you're out of combat. Once you use the new summoner spell, it's back to your old one. What? Alright, wait. Swap one to a new single-use spell after you use it. Alright, so the first swap comes about 6 minutes. You can't use it immediately or anything, right? Does it still share a cooldown with your current one? Because it says your original summoner spells continue cooling down in the background. So is it separate? Are they separate cooldowns? If these are separate cooldowns, this sounds really, really, really strong and really hard to play around. Because somebody could immediately swap and then, like, punish you for it if you weren't immediately aware. Which is silly. They are completely separate cooldowns? This is kind of silly then. That's kind of silly, by the way. I don't know if I like this change. I feel like it should still share like a cooldown with like the one you have, so that, like there's more reasoning behind like when you do it, rather than just like, oh well, I'm out of combat and this person's at half, so I'm just gonna switch to ignite and then flash ignite, fucking ult them or something like. And if they didn't immediately see you do it before you flash ignite ulted them, then they just die. Like what? Like we better still get the notification too. I assume everybody does. Interesting. This could see a lot more use in like mid lane then. I guess this would see more use in mid lane, even more use in like top lane, because you could start with TP. And you're always going to have your TP ticking down, and then you can hot swap to something damaged. Like maybe this would encourage a lot of people to. So like it says like it lowers the cooldown if you've done when you haven't swapped to two. So you every 4 minutes you could still just do ignite, right? Like you could just go to ignite every 4 minutes and just have an ignite on a 4-minute cooldown, basically, right? That's the vibe we're getting here. We get our teleport on a 5-minute cooldown, we get our flash on a 5-minute cooldown, and then we just get ignite on a 4-minute cooldown. So that the keystone could just be a flexible ignite at that point. I mean, it doesn't have to be ignite. It could be exhaust, it could be ghost, it could be heal, it could be barrier, but like. That's interesting. That's interesting. This seems like it could be really, really potent. You swap to ghost and heal sometimes. 3 minutes for ignites. Ugh, that's a lot of ignites, dude. So this sounds really good. Especially for solo laners. Could even be for bot laners. Like, because, I mean, you could take this in any situation, and if you know you're going to get into, like, an all-in or something, you could, like, swap out Flash, use your all-in summoner, and then as soon as you use it, you get flashback, right? Like, even during, like, a fight. Like, let's say you're bot lane, and you swap out your Flash for Exhaust, and you exhaust Ignite, you exhaust somebody, and then you have heal to fight someone, and then when you use Exhaust, it just turns into Flash, and you get to Flash anyway, right? Like, you just get 3 summoner spells in any fight. Or the potential to TP somewhere. This seems really good. Probably better than it was. BMO. Sick. Damn, Evelyn, you look good. Alright, so let's do a quick recap. Mana changes. You get less mana from Doran's Ring. That's the big takeaway. You get more damage versus minions. Not sure a big deal. Probably not. Lost Chapter, higher price point. The AP evens it out, basically. If not, makes it a little bit more cost efficient for when you buy it to make it more competitive with something like Tier. Also, it's at a higher price point, so you have to stay in lane a little bit longer, or there's more incentive to be able to stay to get this, or have to do like a mini recall in between to like buy yourself the time. Tier, heavily nerfed, costs 100 more gold. That's bad. 5% more less mana cost refund that you get, and then you get less mana from when you use the actives. This also couples into the fact that down below, mages are getting less scaling mana, so we're going to get less AP out of it. We're going to get less of a shield out of it. We're going to get less AP when we convert it because of the changes that happened last patch. We might finally see some people just rushing Lost Chapter instead of Cheat of the Goddess, because this is not as powerful as it could be. And instead, then we might go into like Ludens or something like that for like an earlier power spike to take advantage of the flat mana and the mana regen that we have, and to try to push the tempo of the game a little more. Could be. Or we could just default to wave clear mages like always and just play the game safe. Hextech GLP, I don't think these change. The champions that want GLP are generally close range champions that want health on their items regardless and don't necessarily want the early CDR. I think this item is fundamentally not going to be very good unless it's overtuned, but the mana and buffing everything about it, I mean, it could eventually end up being overtuned. This could end up being pretty competitive with Ludens pretty soon. And probably is, honestly, with these changes. But I still think most people would default to Ludens because it's passive, you don't have to think about it, and I think Ludens has I don't know if that's a better build path. Maybe a slightly better build path. I kind of like the way Ludens builds. Fiendish. Nobody builds this unless they're building into a mid-game item anyway. So this does nothing. The Zhonya's and Banshees have 5 more total ability power. That's cool, though, because those are uninspiring items anyway. Twin Shadows. inconsequential, really, because you use this as like supplementary soft engage. Don't really see anybody buy it anyway, but if it gets good enough, then people will buy it for the stats, and then the utility is just an added bonus, so the stats on it can't become too good, right? Or people buy it not for the utility, which is what it should be bought for. Seeker is a little bit more accessible. Maybe you buy it more often into lethality matchups now, because a lot of the times, like, it was 1,200 gold, Lost Chapter was 1,100. You just always bought a Lost Chapter, and you just, like, wave cleared and ignored the person rather than trying to fight through them with Seeker's Arm Guard. So rather than ignoring them, maybe we actually try to fight against their lethality a little bit by getting, like, a Seeker's, and we negate some of their power. Maybe. Spellbinder. Buffing this too much can easily mean that it becomes an item that is built for snowballing, and the champion that gets it first can snowball really hard over other champions because they get to choose the fights that happen, and they get an uncontestable amount of AP because they get way more than anything else can give you at that price point. I don't think these changes cause that to happen, but this is a dangerous item to buff too much because that could easily become a reality, especially for champions that have very easy access to roams like Ahri and Annie and things like that, and that can very easily take advantage of the AP ratio and the movement speed to get in places. Especially for champions that can't normally get in on places like Annie without flash. Rylai's champions that already built it will like it a little bit more. I mean, it's not very cost efficient, so this is a fine buff. Doesn't really change much. This change, I think, could mean that more people build Dark Seal early, especially with the Doran's Ring nerf above, and it could mean that more people are interested in Dark Seal plus Corrupting Pot as a duo, because this means that you can stack up your Dark Seal, and if you stack up the Dark Seal, you can turn it into a Medjai's, you instantly get the movement speed, and then you have the potential to get more out of it. But even just the movement speed on it is pretty valuable, especially if you're a champion that's trying to snowball. If you're trying to pop off, you know, you're going to go your Spellbinders, or you're going to pop off, run around the map, and kill people. And this could make Dark Seal a lot more approachable as like a starting item, especially with the Doran's Ring nerfs. And maybe people will be taking Unsealed Spellbook, and then with Unsealed Spellbook they can get their early TP in, and then they get their early TP in, then they come into lane with their Dark Seal, their Corrupting Pot and Ignite, and they all in you with their fucking Corrupting Pot Ignite damage. Who knows? 100 more mana and 100 gold off of Luden's Echo. I don't even know if these are necessary, because if they're nerfing Archangels enough times, I think people will naturally start to default to something like Luden's Echo, but I think that we will finally start to see more things like Luden's Echo just built naturally, so... Good changes from AP items, probably finally bringing Archangels into line a little bit. And part of that is the mana changes down here, where everybody's gaining mana. Everybody's going to have less mana by like level 5, basically. Level 5, level 6, you're going to have less mana. You're going to have a little bit more mana regen early and a little bit more flat mana. But the mana regen is offset by the mana that you are losing from Doran's Ring. We're losing 20 to 40% of our mana regen that we get currently from Doran's Ring. We are not gaining an appropriate amount of mana regen to offset it, because we would need to gain about 3 to 4, and we're gaining 2 in most cases. A little bit more AP damage to turrets, and now Pen will affect turrets, basically, is the change here, so mages will do slightly more damage. If you build dual Pen, maybe you'll crush turrets. I mean, not going to be a big deal here, but it's something to encourage mages to... hit turrets and maybe push in their lane and get that kind of advantage instead of just follow people around the map or move. If mage damage to turrets gets buffed enough times, maybe it'll be that much more valuable for mages to be able to punish somebody for moving rather than having to move themselves or make action on the map in other places. Amumu, this could make it so he can use this on camps a little more, so it could increase his clear speed slightly. It'll also give him more accessibility to ganks like they want. In particular, when he doesn't have blue buff. I mean, when he has blue buff, he's not going to have this as a problem anyway, but when he doesn't have blue buff, then he can be punished for a couple of missed ganks, where if he misses a Q, then he doesn't really have any ability to trade after the fact, or even like go ahead and clear, or like fight back if somebody were to find him then. So this gives him a little bit more accessibility for that. 50 mana off of rank 5 is like actually crazy, and I don't know if the stun duration on this skill is up. I know the cooldown skill is down substantially, so maybe people could even like max this second or something now that it doesn't cost as much mana and you can get around using it more. Caitlyn does a little bit less headshot damage to minions and monsters, still does more than it does to champions. It's supposed to nerf her lifesteal sustain a little bit, because she can like headshot a minion or monster for 3 times damage and heal for her health bar with lifesteal. Slightly nerfed. Mundo changes are interesting. If the meta supports Mundo running people over, then Mundo will be good. And if the meta is champions that Mundo struggles with, or champions that can dive and really punish Mundo early and then push the pace of a game before Mundo can get going, like mid-game, then Mundo won't be good. Things like Gnar are good, and Gnar is really good into Mundo, but Mundo can hit a critical mass where Gnar can't really deal with him anymore. If Mundo does get ahead a little bit, it's really easy for Mundo to just start running people over, and like especially in like a long lane. If he like hits them with one cleaver, a lot of times he can just run you over straight under the turret, take the turret shots, just regen through it, and just beat you to death, especially if you're not a very tanky champion. So Mundo does have that threat. I mean, you have to assume that with the current state of Morellos being pretty good and Executioners being relatively cheap, that most of the time you're going to be dealing with Morellos, so you can instead have these numbers. Before he used to get 20 to 30, now he gets 25 to 50. So later in the game, this is a pretty substantial buff. I think like his mid game will be a lot more potent with this 75%. The 50 is not crazy over 40, but 75 is a pretty big buff over 50. So we'll feel this. Mundo could be a lot more potent mid game. Maybe you pick him into some of the situations where there's mono damage types, and then he can build really efficiently and then use that regen to get a good value. He's historically been good into double mages because he can build like Spirit Visage, which he already wants anyway. So with Spirit Visage, this is what, like 120? Is Spirit Visage 20%? If they don't have like a minus healing, then it's 30. So, and then he can also take the increased effectiveness of healing, which I'm pretty sure is multiplicative. So we get 1.3 times 1.05. So we get 136% of his max health regenerated during his ultimate, not counting his passive, which will regen a little bit more too. So I mean, Mundo could definitely become very hard to deal with later in the game. So, and it will heavily incentivize building Morellos and Executioner's Calling and such. Because like during the duration of his ultimate, he would passively regen another 4% health plus Spirit Visage give him like 6. So Mundo can realistically be looking at like 145% max health regen during this ultimate at like level 16. So that means you would have to kill 2.5 Mundos to kill a Mundo, whereas right now you have to kill like 1.5 Mundos, basically. Closer to 2 Mundos. So he basically gets another half a Mundo that you have to deal with. So you can think about it that way. Right now you have to kill 2 Mundos. Later you got to kill 2.5 Mundos. That's another half of a Mundo that you got to deal with. Decisive Strike. People might max Q now. Some people were already maxing Q. It looked like a pretty healthy split of Q and E. So maybe people max Q now instead. Trying to give her some freedom to play in the jungle a little bit. I think her kit could be really good for the jungle. If they make any more changes, then she might become like default like a jungler, because I think her kit is very good for the jungle. She has ramp up damage for camps. She doesn't execute to reset on the multi-minion camps. She has a ranged stun as follow-up, and that she can fish with. That's actually very reliable. And her ultimate is incredibly potent post 6 to set up a gang. So, and it's very easy to land. So if she gets buffed any more for the jungle, I could see her being a very potent jungler. These are buffs mostly to Ivern's late game. His mid game might even be a slightly nerfed. I don't know what the exact numbers really look like. And then Root Collar is going to be a pretty substantial amount easier to land. So that's nice. That's nice to have. Probably pretty decent buffs for him. I don't think he's in a bad spot as is. So if he's a little bit better now, then I think he'll see an okay amount of play. So Kai'Sa, basically they're just removing abuse cases. Her ratio was insane, so they nerfed the ratio that she's going to get from it, and they make it so Death's Dance isn't an abuse case, and they make it so Runaan's Hurricane isn't an abuse case, so she doesn't get full healed from a Q with Death's Dance anymore. She doesn't get to spend half of fights invisible if she's hitting anything with Runaan's Hurricane. And then some slight nerfs on top of that. She's way too reliable. She has these abuse cases that Riot doesn't like, so there's no way that these were going to stay. I don't know why they went into the game like that anyway. Who's to say? She should still be one of the highest DPS AD carries in the game, mostly because of her passive, but these should make it a lot easier to deal with her mid game, because on like 1 to 2 items right now, she spikes incredibly hard, like extremely hard, and it's really hard to deal with her as she gets items that synergize with her kit. Yeah. Kassadin gains 20 shield. This is 50% more shield early. This makes him a lot safer into lanes that he's already probably good into, and the lanes that bully him now don't normally do heavy magic damage, or they can threaten to outright kill him. This will make him slightly safer if they do magic damage in that attempt to outright kill him, but it doesn't protect him against AD champions at all, so it makes him a little bit safer at protecting himself against the AP champions that you normally already pick him into, and it keeps him just as vulnerable into other things, so he's going to be picked into mostly the same shit that he is now, and just be a little bit better at surviving. These mostly look like buffs to AD Kennen. AP Kennen is going to gain a slight amount of burst with like his QW combo, because that's a pretty substantial AP ratio increase. But the attack speed here, plus the base damage, plus bonus damage increases here are like big buffs to AD Kennen. So that's what I'd expect that to favor. Leona gets a slight buff. I still think she's bad like meta-wise right now, so don't think it really makes her crazy, but it will probably make her a little bit better in solo queue, a little bit more intimidating, and she punishes mage supports. Right now it's like peel supports or other tanks, and she doesn't really like those matchups in particular, so she's okay into other tanks. She's okay into peel supports early, but then eventually they kind of invalidate her, so... These Lux buffs actually seem crazy. She just seems better in every single way. She's becoming a lot more reliable with like her wave clear. She's going to spend less mana to do it. She always gets her shield now, so she can protect herself a lot better in laning phase. Just spends less mana, can fish for more, has more damage early, and more attack speed. These just seem probably over the top buffs. She's probably going to be extremely strong in mid and support, and I expect this... what's her win rate right now? Let's look at her win rate right now. If it's not a little low in the first place, I would expect her to be broken after the changes. So her mid win rate is about 50%. I would honestly expect mid Lux to have one of the highest win rates in the game post these changes, pretty easily. If she doesn't, I'd be very surprised. Support Lux is at 46. I mean, support Lux will probably get like closer to 50%. But these are big changes, and these wave clear changes and the changes to E are going to be big changes for her in mid lane. So I think these make mid lane Lux like a lot harder to deal with, especially with like she gets a more reliable shield, gets to cast more of everything, and she'll be much stronger. Slight Rammus buff. Rammus is kind of one-dimensional, but he's a solo queue staple, and he'll be a little bit tankier early and do slightly more damage to camps. Godspeed, Rammus. Take over solo queue. Poppy got slight nerfs to compensate for the fact that she got some slight range buffs, and her ultimate got changed so that you can hit people during the snap cast of it now. This means that she has reliable engage now. From like 1,000 range, she can flash, E, ult you, just snap cast it and get the knock up, and then you can take damage during it, and it's easy for them to set up out of it. So this makes her engage better, this makes her gank setup better, this makes her follow up better, so... Poppy will be much more potent in later in the game at forcing her will upon people, and be able to convert things more easily from laning phase with the jungler, because she'll be able to set up very easily for like the jungler to follow up. You don't have to like time things particularly anymore. And then her ranged one, where she can knock people out of fights, is a little bit more reliable. These changes don't matter. Sona will do a little bit more damage. The base attack damage is more important than the power cord damage, because you use this more, obviously. The biggest thing here is that she's going to bully melees a little harder. She's still all-inable by certain melees, and she's still probably not going to be as potent as something like Janna or Nami, or as loved as something like Lulu for her ability to protect people, but Sona's a little bit of like a jack of all trades. She like pokes people early. She has like some she has some kind of engage that she can do with like her ultimate and potentially flash. She has some okay peel, but not crazy peel. So this will just make her a little bit better. It's not going to like change what she does at all. It's not going to change like her matchups at all. Really, she's going to stay about the same, but slightly better. Syndra. Syndra deals more damage to champions, so Syndra normally overkills you anyway. She doesn't need like 7 balls to kill you, so they say it should be more rewarding when you get multiple ball ultimates. Well, that's cool and all, but she normally kills you with like a 4 or 5 ball ultimate anyway. She doesn't need 7. I mean, maybe this alleviates the fact that she can spam Qs in a brush and then flash out and ult you and you die from full, so maybe it's a healthy change in that regard, but she's going to gain overall DPS, and she doesn't normally need that damage unless she's literally just sitting in a brush, stacking up her balls to ult you and kill you with no counterplay. So, probably a buff overall. I don't think this really changes, except for the fact that she can't one-shot people from brushes as easily. Probably a buff overall. Should be. Her teamfight DPS should go up, especially on tanks. She'll be a very potent threat to tanks. She already is, with her low cooldowns and high AP ratios. This is a pretty substantial bug fix for Talon. It gives him 75 more range. This gives him more range than most mages have for auto attack range. So if they get in range to threaten him with auto attacks, now he can trade back more effectively. So this is only 75 range, but it's 75 range at like a key interval, because most mages have like 500 to 550 range. So this is actually very impactful. I would expect this to make him much better in mid lane and much more able to contest ranged champions. Hi, Photon. Finishing up my patch review. Warwick, a little bit less damage, still going to be basically uncontestable if you find him in a fight early, because his low health steroid that he gets is absolutely unfair amounts of stats. But he'll feel about the same. He will have the same strength. He'll just be a little bit weaker. So if they're keeping him, his identity basically the same, but he's a little bit weaker, then that's a fine change, because he is overtuned. But they're going to keep his power in like the places that it currently is. Ziggs will get a little bit more AoE damage. This can amount to up to 200 damage if you got max damage off in like a minefield, saying like a team fight or something like that. Which is actually pretty substantial. But I don't expect this to like really bring Ziggs back. In fact, I don't ever want to see Ziggs back or anything. I think he's very uninteractive and just kind of like toxic champion design. But this is a slight buff, you know, it helps a little. Makes his wave clear a little bit easier too from range. You can just leave the E there. So they said they wanted to make Baron's damage spread out more. I don't see how this does this. No, I hate Ziggs. Because this seems like it's just going... The spike attack damage is auto is like avoidable. And basic and like the basic attacks are obviously going to be on like the main target, like whoever's closest to Baron. So I don't think these do the change that they're saying it does. But he's going to do a little bit less base damage, but he'll do more damage with his like with his stuff, with his autos and spikes. So more damage to the tank, more damage if you stand in this shit, but less damage spreading around. I don't think this meets the goal that they wanted at all, unless like you have to split the damage between champions because he's doing way too much to your tank or something. But the health buff is really important here, because Baron gets killed like on spawn by 2 champions by like super easily, super reliably at the moment, or killed in like a couple of seconds like post spawn if like your team's there and they're not prepared to deal with it. So buffing Baron is fine. Probably should be. It could even be buffed more than this. Like I don't know what these damage changes are. I think they could do a different route for those. Rift Herald will do more less damage to itself and more damage to turrets, and if it gets multiple turret charges off, it'll always get at least 1500 damage, which is much more than it does now, because normally it gets off 1 good hit and then it has an okay hit, and if it hit 3 things, then the 3rd thing's probably not taking almost any damage at all. So this actually makes it do substantially more damage if you can protect the thing. It's going to take more damage if they can get behind it and hit the eyeball, or if it gets turned around somehow. I can just imagine this thing walking up to about the ranger wants to charge, turning around to smack a minion to the side of it, and then just getting hit in the eyeball and then being much less useful because now it loses 40%. But at least Shelly here, whatever you want to call the Rift Herald, at least she'll be more impactful if you can protect her. And this unsealed spellbook seems kind of broken, because from my interpretation of what's going on here, you can swap, like you could swap out your flash for another damage summoner. Use the damage summoner, use like Exhaust Ignite, use Barrier Ignite real quick, and then as soon as you use that one summoner, the other one's going to swap back to your original one, which cooldown is separate. So you can still have your flash after you use it. So if you start the fight and you immediately Exhaust Ignite, then you're still going to have your flash afterward to chase, or you have your flash to get away or something like that. So this could end up being extremely strong, because you get an extra keystone for every fight that you could want post 6 minutes. It means that you could take teleport default and then opt into whatever fight summoner that you want anytime that you want. It means that you could opt into taking a TP just like because you immediately see something happening and you're not in combat. And this means that even like potentially bot lanes could take advantage of this, because you can swap to multiple fight summoners and not really get punished for it at all, because you can still do your normal thing afterward. So this is dangerous. This might be really good. might be really, really, really good. Not sure. We'll have to talk about like the exact iterations. I do like that it doesn't just reduce the cooldown of like Flash and TP anymore, because like top laners are taking it in some cases literally just because it reduced cooldown by a significant amount, and I don't think that's like the reason that it should be being taken. So that's about it. Then we have BMO. Where is it?